Good morning. In case you're wondering, he's Steve and I'm Rajiv. So Steve and I are really delighted to be sharing with you our experiences in addressing some of the pressing problems as you try and migrate some of your custom applications to public IaaS providers like Amazon, Azure, Google, and others. So I'm going to start off with some data. This data was collected in partnership with the CSA, about more than 300 professionals, many like yourselves, across different industries, to understand what is the state of IaaS adoption today. And some of the data was actually quite surprising. This data, I'll show you three sort of, the three pieces of data that we got from the study. And there's many more, so if you want to understand more, please come and talk to us, or actually we'll have the data published on our website as well. But this is one of the first, which is, if you look at the percentage of custom apps, these are your homegrown applications. These are applications your teams have developed that today are in your private data centers that are moving to public IaaS providers. There's a 24% drop in your private data centers, and there's a 50+% increase in moving to public IaaS providers. This year, the next 12 months, is the tipping point. We'll end up with more custom applications running in public IaaS providers than your private data centers. Steve, you have some experience in this as well.
Yeah, I think we're all in this boat right now, and if you're not, you might be a little bit of a lagger as we get into the innovation around what's there for us in the cloud. So we're all at this sort of tipping point right now as we minimize the amount of data centers that we have, minimize that physical footprint, right, of the infrastructure, and as we move more into the cloud. And it's a powerful graph to understand not just how it's happening, but how quickly it's happening. So as we look at this from a security standpoint, we have to understand that this is happening. It's happening in core IT, it's happening in shadow IT, and the idea is, how do we get there first, right? We have projects internally that are called Cloud First, Secure by Design, right? Those type of initiatives to make sure that we're there first and securing the environment as they push these apps, right? Development apps, test apps, and production apps and infrastructure into the cloud. The key that really you really point to in an instance like this is a lot of this right now is people are moving pre-prod. Right? You hear that a lot where I'm going to go pre-prod first, we'll see how that goes, and then we'll get more into the production side of the house. But what folks a lot of times don't realize is, what do we put in pre-prod and test? We put production data. So your ability to go to the cloud and move to the cloud and do it in a way where you don't have to secure it because it's pre-prod is sort of a fallacy across the board. As we move production data into test environments to make sure that things are going to operate effectively, it's the same type of controls as you need in the production environment. And we'll get into more about that as we go through.
Yeah, and here's an example of why you should care. Another piece of data that surprised me is that 73% of the custom applications that we're talking about here are mission critical. Now, just to put this in context, think about an airline, right? If your pilot reservation system goes down, you're going to be in trouble. So that's the kind of mission critical applications we're talking about that you have, that the industry has developed over time, and 73% are mission critical. This was surprising to me as well, and a little unnerving, and Steve and I were talking about this. Steve, actually, why is it that the security guys are not invited? Why are they not part of the decisioning and the move to the cloud?
And so look, it's a challenge across the board. Most people are nodding their heads when they see graphs like this. You know, we have a challenge on our on-prem environment as it is with shadow IT, right? You have marketing folks, you have folks in the line of businesses that will kind of have their shadow IT organizations and customize their own apps, put it on infrastructure, and they'll hang it externally facing. We're always challenged on the security side is, how do we do secure design? Right? How do we get involved at the inception of an idea? Right? We always talk about the difference between CISOs on, it was a company at Google, or it was Google actually, and it was an East Coast firm that'll go unnamed, and it was a story of a CISO at a big financial institution on the East Coast saying, hey, look, I position myself in the firm that if something gets pushed out, an app gets pushed out, that I have the ability to pull it back if it's not secure, if they didn't do it right. And there was a gentleman who ran engineering at Google who said, "It's interesting that you talk about it that way. I've actually positioned myself in the company to help build security into the inception of an idea that I never want to be in a position where I'm pulling something back. We lose money, it impacts customers. It's just huge impact across the board." We have that challenge and that dilemma internally right now on-prem, but we have an ability to change that as we move to the cloud, where we can push the same type of controls out across the board, and we can actually sit on this sort of tipping point where you have an ability to start over and do things differently as you move to a new network. And I don't think people talk about it enough, sort of where we are right now. This is not migrating what you currently have and just pushing it into the cloud. This is a full stop on what you have and securing things differently and better as you push to the cloud, and controlling it in a way where you're not going to see a lot of things in here about not included. You're hopefully going to see these numbers flipped about being included as you move into the cloud.
So let's look at some real customer examples. And these are real world customer examples who are in the process of leveraging the technology I'll be sharing with you in making sure their mission-critical customer applications have the kinds of security, have the kind of controls they need. So a car rental company, they had built this application for managing their fleet. And as they were moving this application to AWS, they realized that some of the reservation managers were putting credit card numbers in the comment field of the application. Now, they weren't trying to be nefarious. They were just trying to find an efficient way to get their job done. But you can imagine that if this had moved to AWS in the clear, this would have been a massive PCI violation. Take the next example, a big ag company. They realized that the highly confidential data about some of their research and analysis was being stored in S3 bucket that was publicly accessible. Or an insurance company that had an issue with some of the applications running in Azure, but did not have the audit, did not have the capability to understand what is going on. There are many such examples. You can look at these. Many of these examples are those mission-critical examples we spoke about that are business-critical. And there are a number of these examples that you are running, that we are running, that in public clouds, that we want to make sure have the kind of controls that we need. Now, you also had some of these.
Yeah, I could fill up 1,000 slides with examples like this just over my career. I'm sure we all could as we go through and learn from our experiences. I think that the key to understand is I keep focusing on that cloud first. And one of the things that's very, very important, and it was challenging for us to get it through, but we eventually did it, is getting to the cloud before everyone else. Right? Our infrastructure folks and our app folks years ago were sort of tinkering with the idea. We were a little late to the game, frankly, around fully adopting that cloud strategy. But we ended up working with SkyEye and others to basically get there first. We called it cloud first. And we ended up really getting ahead of the game so that when things did migrate, they migrated securely, right? When you look at DLP, you look at the threat protection side, the encryption, the access management, all of those different types of controls. Not only do we have a moral obligation to do that to our customers, but also as a financial institution, we're the most highly regulated. So we have a regulatory requirement. And we jokingly call this, risk transference. People think that as you move to the cloud, you're going to transfer your risk to Microsoft and Amazon. And that's just fundamentally incorrect. You are just as responsible as you transfer your apps and your infrastructure to the cloud as you are on-prem. There's no risk transference there. So it's important to get there first. If they're already there, to get there now and try to be a bit more agile around how you secure the apps and the infrastructure that they're putting there.
And if you look at some of these controls, if they're familiar to you, they should be, because these are the CASB controls, Cloud Access Security Broker, right? That we as an industry has deployed these controls for the SaaS services we use, for our data sitting in Salesforce and ServiceNow and 365 and such. And we're talking about here is extending those same controls beyond SaaS to our IaaS environments, to our custom applications running in some of these public IaaS providers. And as Steve mentioned, today we already have the notion of a shared responsibility model. The analysts have spoken about it. I think there's some paper from Amazon talking about it as well. Now, I don't expect you to read this. Like I said, you can get this on the internet. But there is the shared responsibility model where you are still responsible for some of the things that are important to you, and you can leverage what the public IaaS providers provide to you for making sure that you deliver what's expected of you. And so far when you looked at SaaS, our responsibility was, think about it as guarding the front door. Is your data that is sitting in a Salesforce, in a ServiceNow, in a 365, in a Workday, and so on and so forth. By applying those controls like DLP and looking for threat protection, activity monitoring, and so on and so forth. And same is true here as well. Again, you saw those examples of those companies I mentioned. You still need the same kind of controls. You still need to apply DLP so that car rental company doesn't have customer PCI data sitting in the clear in AWS. So the ag company doesn't have their confidential data sitting in a S3 bucket that is exposed. You still have those kinds of controls you require. Think of that as guarding the front door. But in some sense, there's also, in an IaaS environment, you also need to guard the back door. To put this in context, when I'm using Salesforce, all I'm responsible for is to make sure that what goes into Salesforce, what comes out of Salesforce, is meeting my requirements. There isn't a rep, for example, who's gone rogue, who's downloading all the contacts before he walks out the door. But when I'm working in a public IaaS environment, like in AWS or Azure or Google, I need to make sure that the infrastructure that I'm configuring is also used effectively. Right? Again, as an analogy, the way I think about it is if the IaaS provider is like a builder, he or she has built you a home, a very secure home with double pane windows and padlocks and so on and so forth. But if you leave the key on top of the doormat, or if you invite the wrong person into your house, or if you leave the window open, that's your responsibility. That's the shared responsibility, if you will, right? There's a front door that you always had to do in the SaaS world, which you have to do in IaaS as well, and there's a back door as well that now becomes more important for you to cover. So let's take a step back and look at the challenge that we're talking about here. And again, Steve, you were talking about, as you speaking about the presentation, that there are a number of applications that you have leveraged that are in the SaaS world. But there are a certain number that you're aware of, and probably even more, in the IaaS world, right? Which sometimes tends to dwarf the ones that you're trying to adopt in the SaaS world, right? And this kind of slide puts that in perspective. So if there are about 25,000 or so SaaS services out there, and maybe about 300 or so that you would say are enterprise critical, right? Like a Salesforce and 365, Box, Dropbox, and so on and so forth. There are more than 8 million custom applications just across the top 20,000 companies that are running out there that you need to make sure you have those kinds of controls, the back door controls, the front door controls for these applications. Now, the way we and other CASB providers, the way we onboarded an application like a 365 was our own teams took all the activities, I think there are 357 activities in 365, and mapped them and said, this activity is a upload or a download, so maybe DLP needs to be applied here. This activity is a login, so I need to look for compromised accounts. This activity is a privileged activity, so I need to look for privileged abuse, those kinds of things. So my team did those mappings and made sure we provide those controls. Now, we can't do that for 8 million applications. That's not possible. We can't take the time to understand all these applications. So what we've done here is turned it around. The same tools that we developed internally, we're making them available to you. So you can onboard your application on your own. But then think about it. Each of these applications is unique. And anytime you ask the developers to get involved, there's friction there, right? You now, as a security team, you're getting in the way. You're slowing them down. And so here's where AI comes to the rescue. So what we've done is taken that same tool, like I said, that my team used internally to onboard a 365 or a Salesforce, made it available to you, but what we've added to it is AI such that without writing a single line of code, the tool now understands the activities. It learns what's going on. It maps them onto those controls that are required, and then provides the ability for you to say, I want that DLP policy that I'm applying to, let's say, Box, I want to apply it to my custom app as well. When you're looking for forensics, when you're looking for telemetry, if someone's accessing my company.salesforce.com at 9 a.m. from Palo Alto, and is accessing a custom app at 9:30 a.m. from Penang, you can detect it. We can detect and find out these are not possible. This is a compromised account. Right? So the same kinds of controls that are applicable today in SaaS, we extend them to IaaS, but doing it in a way that's self-serve, that allows you, your teams, to onboard your custom apps. And amongst, if you take the combination, more than 8 million of these custom apps to come on board to a CASB environment, applying consistent policy, consistent telemetry across your environment. So as you think about the notion of extending these CASB controls beyond SaaS to IaaS, if you think about it, as Steve mentioned, where the security teams are today, where they want to be, you're actually empowering your line of business to be able to leverage the power of IaaS. Steve, you had a comment on that when you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I sit in the same seats as you do and attend the conference, as a participant, and I think that there's always a few themes that sit over security, and one is more of a defeatist attitude, like it's impossible to do X, right? The threats change so much, technology evolves so much that it's really difficult, and in a lot of ways there's somewhat of a, an impossible type mentality that sometimes sits over security. And I think that translates into the companies, right, and into the app dev worlds and the infrastructure worlds where we get sort of labeled as sort of a barrier to progress, right? And I had a boss one time that used to explain to me that people have to want you to be successful. People have to want security to be successful. But sometimes the way things are structured where we set up these barriers, people avoid them. That's where you get shadow IT, shadow security, whatever you want to call it, where they'll circumvent the process to get around it so they don't have to deal with you. And I think one of the nice things about, and really it's empowering about the cloud, is that you have an ability to shift that paradigm a little bit where you're actually part of the solutioning, right? And that barrier sort of gets brought down in a lot of ways where you can work with them to get what you want and get there safely and securely. Not many times in your career do you have a chance to sort of start over in that area. And we're seeing that a lot in the cloud aspect as we migrate, that we're migrating together and we're there helping them solution rather than getting in the way and sort of blocking and tackling.
The one word that you used, Steve, empowerment, right? It's not often that we talk of security as empowering. Right? The second or third slide showed that security folks are typically not invited when people are developing custom apps or migrating custom apps or deploying custom apps. Because the mindset is security gets in the way, they're going to stop me, they're going to prevent me from going as fast as I want to go. But if you turn that around, if you think of security as empowering, again, the analogy I think of is the brakes in a car, right? Most people say the brakes in a car are to slow me down. But if you take a step back and say, it's actually to make you go fast. If you didn't have brakes, you wouldn't be going fast at all. And that's the mindset that we need to have. And empowering I love that word. And in fact, as we think about extending CASB controls from a SaaS world to an IaaS world, that's approximately how we think of the world as well, is almost, again, an analogy, think back of Amazon. When Amazon, when it came out, was an online bookstore. And what really took them off is when they became the everything store, when they empowered businesses to create e-commerce presence on the Amazon platform. Similarly, here is what you're doing here, what you're trying to do here, is for you, the security professionals, security practitioners, to empower the line of business, to use that custom application, to host a custom application in a place that is more cost-effective than what they might have to do otherwise, but without compromising on the security, the privacy, the governance, compliance that you're responsible for, right? And that is the shift. That is the magnitude of what you're talking about here, right? Which is we've done a really good job building this CASB controls for SaaS, which is really important, growing rapidly. But the IaaS world is growing even faster, right? This is where a lot of the challenges exist today as your lines of business are trying to be an agile organization, as they're trying to be cost effective. And it's for us as practitioners to make sure that we give them those controls, provide them that safety net, give them that policies such that they can take those custom applications, they can run them in a place that's best for the business. And that really is the frontier. That's really the fulfilling the importance of what this control point brings to you. I think of CASB as a cloud control point. So far, we've applied this control point to SaaS services, but now we're applying it to everything in the cloud. Not only SaaS that a third party provides you, but also as you're moving your custom applications to the cloud. And your perspective on how this sits in with where you are trying to take both TIA as well as the industry.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll word it in a way that hopefully resonates a little bit more around solutioning, and that is the fact that they're going there, right? We're moving into 365, right? We're moving into the Azure space. We have their attention, right, from a security standpoint as they migrate these things into the cloud. That's not really the issue. We've had their attention really for the past 5 years. We've watched security budgets go up. We've watched the media, right, managing the outrage up around cyber. There's always an attack that's occurring that hits the press. It's not the attention part. It's what we do now that we have it. And I think that's really important for folks to understand. You're not going to have their attention for that much longer as we migrate. It's up to us to do something with that attention and do it the right way and shift things into an area where we are looked at as a partner and looked at as empowering them in a way and being more agile as they do it. My worry is not that we can't defeat this, that we can't win. Like, I don't really like those conversations. My worry is we don't take advantage of the attention that we have right now to do it right.
Yeah, one comment you made, Steve, is that in our careers, there aren't very many times when we get the opportunity such as this to at least conceptually start over, right? That you can now overlay, you can now provide those controls where you can now manage your cost, but give you even more controls than what you had earlier in a way that empowers and enables, right? So it really is a very important part in our careers that we have the ability to leverage the power of the cloud, even as we are bringing more controls than what we had in our legacy environments. So I invite you to obviously chat with Steve about his experiences. Also come to the Sky High booth at South 1733 to talk to Steve as well as other practitioners, folks like yourselves. How have they gone about this cloud journey? It's George from Etihad, or Michael from the state of Missouri, Andy from HP, Frank from Booz Allen, and Maurice from Harman. They'll describe to you where they started, how they got there, what challenges they faced. And I think it might be interesting for you as well. And if you want to see the Sky High technology that in extending CASB to IaaS work, come to the booth. There'll be demos there, or just reach out to us and be happy to share that with you. Thank you very much.